Diseases and defects of the circulatory system. There are a number of diseases, these that are acquired due to the environmental factors, and defects. These are structural deformities that may be present from birth that affect the circulatory system. Now we look at three commonest of such diseases and defects. The first of such a disease is thrombosis. Now the term thrombosis refers to the formation of a clot, blood clot, that is, within the blood vessels. There are various factors that can lead to the formation of a clot. One of them is presence of obstructive structures such as cholesterol plaque within the walls of the blood vessel, or could be exposure or breakage of the wall of the blood vessel can also lead to the formation of the clot. But the one that commonly leads to thrombosis, and therefore the disease and defect of the circulatory system, is the presence of structural factors that obstruct the smooth flow of the blood. So whenever we have such obstructive structures, then blood clots. So this is our blood clot. So clot is simply due to the coagulation of blood cells. So thrombosis is formation of a clot within the blood vessel. Now, depending on the part of the body or the organ in which the thrombosis occur, there are different types of thrombosis, and the commonest are coronary thrombosis, and as the term suggests, coronary thrombosis is one that occurs within the blood vessels of the heart, and in particular within the coronary artery, which supplies blood to the heart. So here, this diagram, you can see this, these, the ones in red, these are the coronary artery. Blue represent the coronary vein. So the coronary artery supplies blood and therefore nutrients to the cardiac muscle cells. When a plaque is formed on the walls of the coronary artery, this causes blockage. Now, this blockage becomes increasingly fibrous, or accumulation of fatty materials on the artery also increases. This leads to narrowing of the coronary artery, resulting in less and less blood flowing to the heart. So blood cannot pass freely through the part to the cardiac muscles. Now, depending on where it occurs, if the narrowing occurs here, then a very large part will be affected. If it occurs at this point, then the parts beyond that point are going to be affected. So insufficient oxygen, therefore, will reach these heart muscles that requires a lot of oxygen to function. Now, a serious blockage of the artery can result into a fatal heart attack. So in a heart attack, the cardiac muscles suffocate. The cardiac muscle cells cannot get enough oxygen, and again, depending on the portion of the heart that is affected, the heart attack may be mild or may be massive, depending on the muscle fibers, the mass of the muscle fibers that are deprived of oxygen. Now, coronary thrombosis may be caused by heavy intake of fat, which results to high amount of cholesterol in the blood. As cholesterol accumulates, in the coronary arteries, it leads to blockage of the blood vessels, thus causing less oxygen to reach the heart muscles. Other causes may be heavy intake of alcoholic drinks, smoking, being overweight, and psychological and emotional stress. Therefore, to avoid coronary thrombosis, it is important that individuals practice healthy lifestyles by reducing the amount of alcoholic drinks intake, stop smoking, and generally avoiding psychological and emotional stress, not to mention exercising regularly to keep the body weight in check. A second common defect of the circulatory system is arteriosclerosis. Arteriosclerosis refers to the thickening and hardening of the walls of the blood vessels. The hardening of the blood vessels results in permanent damage, because as the blood vessel walls become thickened, they lose their elasticity. And this loss of elasticity will interfere with the normal functioning. Now, the hardening and thickening may be due to deposition of calcium salts or even cholesterol. Now, whenever the inner walls, that is the endothelium, is obstructed. Remember, the endothelium has a smooth lining to allow the free flow of blood. So whenever this wall is covered with deposition, then this interferes with the free flow of blood. So this deposition may be due to calcium deposit or even cholesterol. Now, the most common type of arteriosclerosis is characterized by excessive growth of fibrous connective tissue in the wall of the arteries. So as more and more materials are deposited, there's growth of connective tissue that is not as elastic. Now, this will cause the hardening of the wall. The wall, particularly in the arteries, lose their elasticity. And with the loss of elasticity, then this will increase the resistance to blood flow, leading to overworking of the heart. So as the lumen becomes narrower and narrower, there will be other complications such as heart failure that may result from arteriosclerosis. Now, the causes of arteriosclerosis varies, and this includes being overweight, lack of exercise, emotional stress, and also excessive intake of salts that leads to deposition of calcium on the inner linings of the arteries. Also, consumption of fatty diets that is rich in cholesterol can also contribute. So one way of controlling arteriosclerosis, of course, is to physically exercise regularly, avoiding stress, reducing intake of salt, and taking drugs that reduce the cholesterol levels in the blood. A third defect of the circulatory system is the presence of varicose veins. Now, varicose veins, the condition in which the superficial veins, that is the veins that are just under the skin, become swollen and flabby. This comes about as a result of the failure of the semilunar valves to function. When the semilunar valves fail to function, then they cannot prevent a backflow. You see, in the varicose veins are characterized by being swollen and flabby, so they appear on the surface, especially at the back of the legs, like in this diagram here. In a normal person, the veins should not normally be that visible on the surface. But when the semilunar valves fail to function properly, then they cannot prevent a backflow. So, when there is a backflow of blood, remember, the function of the veins is to transport blood back to the heart. So, a backflow will lead to an accumulation of blood, resulting in a bulge at the point where the semilunar valves, the defective semilunar valves, are present. So it is this collection of blood that leads to the swelling, and the swelling then appears on the surface as varicose veins. In a normal functioning semilunar valves, the valves will prevent a backflow so that there is this continuous smooth flow from the tissues to the heart, and the veins will not swell and thus will not appear on the surface as varicose veins. Now, this disease can be controlled by regular physical exercise of the body and also avoiding being seated for long periods of time, or standing for long periods of time, because the immobility of the legs does place a heavy burden on the semilunar valves, such that when somebody stands for a long period of time with the legs being below the body and the blood has to be moved up against gravity for long periods of time, then this can lead to damage of the semilunar valve. So regular movement of the legs does help in the flowing back of blood through the veins, because remember, the muscles, skeletal muscles around the veins do assist in the movement of blood through the veins. So by exercising regularly physically, these muscles contract and help to push the blood. Otherwise, without the exercise, then the valves may in the long term be overwhelmed with this task of preventing the backflow of blood, especially in the legs, because of the position of the body, the legs being below the heart, and therefore the blood must move against gravity as it flows back to the heart. So regular physical exercise is one way of preventing the development of the varicose veins. Now, a fourth and very common disorder of the circulatory system is high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. Now, the normal blood pressure varies between 90 to 140 millimeters of mercury, that is the systolic pressure, over between 60 to 90 millimeters of mercury, that is the diastolic pressure. That is when the ventricles contract, this is a range of blood pressure that is generated, and when the ventricles relax, the range of blood pressure that is present in the circulatory system is between 60 to 90 millimeters of mercury. Now, any value above 140 over a value above 190 is regarded to be high blood pressure. That is, during systolic pressure, when the value is beyond 140, and when during the diastolic pressure the value is beyond 90, then that is a condition of high blood pressure. Now, high blood pressure is a disorder that is associated with a number of factors, mainly lifestyle factors such as heavy drinking, smoking, taking of large quantities of salt in the food, and general body stress. Now, other disorders such as arteriosclerosis may also contribute to the development of high blood pressure, because arteriosclerosis leads to the narrowing of the lumen of arteries. So this will force the heart to pump more powerfully, thereby increasing the blood pressure. Now, the heart of a hypertensive person usually has to overwork, especially where the cause is the arteriosclerosis. Now, there are a number of complications that can arise from hypertension. One of them is brain stroke. Now, hypertension may lead to the bursting of arteries and capillaries. And should this happen in the brain, the bursting of capillaries leads to leakage of blood, and when brain cells come into contact with the blood, they die, and that's what constitutes a brain stroke. So depending on the part of the brain that is affected, brain stroke and the death of the brain cells may result in paralysis or loss of movement or any other body functions, depending on the part of the brain that is affected. In fact, in some cases, the strokes may be fatal if a large part of the brain cells are affected, and if that part controls a vital function, like, for example, the heart or breathing. Another complication that arises from hypertension is kidney failure. Again, with the rupturing of capillaries, particularly like in the glomerulus, when these capillaries in the glomeruli rupture, this reduces the functionality of the kidney, and in time, the kidney will not be able to efficiently excrete waste products, leading to kidney failure. It can also result in poor visibility. The eyes, especially the retina part of the eye, is very sensitive, and when the blood capillaries there are affected as a result of the high blood pressure, then vision is going to be impaired. They said high blood pressure can also result in arteriosclerosis, because the high pressure may lead to damage of particularly the endothelium. And when the endothelium is damaged, the body responds by depositing or formation of fibrous connective tissue. The fibrous connective tissues narrows the lumen and leads to thickening of the wall, and that's forming arteriosclerosis. Again, with arteriosclerosis, there comes other complications again, such as stroke and rupturing of blood capillaries in other parts of the body. Now, hypertension is more common in individuals that are aged 40 years and above, and it can be controlled through a number of ways that include through regular physical exercises, reducing intake of salt, avoiding excessive drinking of alcoholic beverages, quitting smoking, and also avoiding general body stress by practicing healthy lifestyles and striving to have peace of the mind